Just like I was telling you, my background, my ancestry, it is from a very rich artistic heritage. I can tell you, the list goes on and on. My aunt Deheabo, she was well known as a good storyteller. I had that first-hand experience, my childhood days. We would sit around her maybe shortly after dinner, and then she would tell us stories, beautiful stories laced with characters. Most of those characters are animal characters. But you see, the interesting thing for me then was that these animal characters, they took up personalities that you could relate with people in our villages. And so what we were doing then was matching some of those characters, with people that we knew. And so, but my turning point is always when we start, she will say tabi. And by default, all of us will chorus, war. So you hear things like tabi, war, tabi, war. And that extends even to my uncles. I have the Elijah. The Elijah was so good with metal works and aluminum, and he could construct anything with metal. I used to marvel at the works that he produced. Our family history has it that most of my siblings, the boxes that they took to school, he was the one who constructed it. And for some reason, he seemed to have this very working cordial relationship with my aunt Deheabo. And the same thing goes even to my uncle Dikago, so good with woodworks. And so I came from that background. And so you can imagine by the time I had my formal art training at the university, it wasn't something strange. I had desired to go to what we knew then as the number one, university in Nigeria. When you talk about their history, then this was Ahmadu Bello University Zaria. Because of my quest to want to identify with the very best, I had to go on excursion to this school, and I spent some times. I was in Somoru. I even went to Shika. I met some friends then, and I saw the school, and I looked at it. Oh, they had a very, very rich collections of work of old students and things like that. I had my sketch pad with me. It wasn't in this era where you have your cell phones or cameras that you can take random pictures. No, it was my sketch pad. I spent hours and hours for the few days I spent there drawing every art piece, particularly their sculpture garden, anything that I could lay hands on my eyes or my sketch pad, I will pull it up then. And then I met some friends, one of them is Perekie Johnson. He's late now. He was from Port Harcourt. And so we had a beautiful time and we made good connections there. So it was just to tell you that I was so exposed to some other areas and some other schools of thoughts and all of that. Of course, being to IMT, I had friends who had graduated from IMT, I think it's Institute of Management Technology in Enugu. This is in the eastern part. And then, of course, they were very good sculpture works. And of course, I was already familiar with the Nsuka art. Incidentally, this was happening at the time I was residing in the city called Owerri in Imo State. That was the capital city. And then the university, Imo State University, was just starting out then. But because I was already exposed to some of these things, a friend of mine, seeing the dilemma, I found myself wondering, okay, which school do I settle for? Because of the religious intolerance and some of these disturbances up there in the north. So my friend was like, why don't you go to University of Benin? And it struck me because he told me Benin, of course, had its own artistic tradition because of the old Benin Empire. And then, we had to look at it closely. Say, look, Benin is very close to Lagos. Lagos was the art market. That was the hub of it all. So you talk about galleries and having the opportunity of going there to exhibit and sell your works. I'm saying all of this because it's very key, it's very important. Uh, Family traditions. Anyway, because this is my story, so I'm at liberty to share it. My siblings had wanted me to study something else, and they had their ideas and they had what they wanted me to study. I wanted to play soccer. That's all that I wanted to do. Even in 1988, while I was writing my final West African examination, a day to our exam, if a local some call it soccer, but it's football, So a local team called Golden Guinea, they will have a match. I will go walk down to the stadium. Sometime we will have to jump the fence just to catch a glimpse of that. And this was not the era of Premiership. Way back 1988, you being able to watch, foreign leagues and all of that. That's a huge luxury. But the thing is, that's what I wanted to do. So quite early in life, I made friends with most players and I was, so friendly with me. It wasn't because of the money that most people will say, that you can find in football these days. No, it was just the passion for it. I just love soccer because as a little boy, we played on the field. We kicked anything you can imagine. And so now that I had settled to go and study fine art, it was a challenge which school to settle for because I wanted to go to the best school. And so when my friend said, you can have it all, I loved the Nsukka Art Schools simply because of what I call their propaganda in terms of academics, because I have read things by Chike, Okeke, and all of that. And of course, one of my favorite art historian, Chika Nyako. I was drawn to the way they have weaved the story around Uli, the synthesis. And so it was a good academic propaganda for me because now I can relate with the things they are writing about because I saw my mom with their age grade, they could make designs on the wall. In my own local community, we'll call it Uri. And then, of course, they can make designs on the skin and things like that. But looking at it now, using, call it Western paradigm to define some of these, I found that very interesting. But in terms of the practical aspect of art, the visual aspect of it, more especially, taking things head on. I want to, because I was already drawing, even way back in my high school, I call it secondary school, I could draw very well, and the resemblance is always striking. I still remember those days I did a drawing of, I think her name is Bridget Wankwo, if I'm mistaken. She was a commissioner of education back then, and that was the sensation in my school. My friends, my classmates, everyone, fell in love with that drawing. So I was already exposed to some of these things. So I wanted to get the best out of it. So that's how I settled. I said, well, considering that Benin, proximity to Lagos, and of course the artistic traditions, the bronze things that we have studied in art histories and all of that, here we go. We go to University of Benin. And I can tell you, it was a huge shock when I got to the University of Benin and I realized that the campus where the fine art department was located was different from the main campus, which is called Obowo. Obowo campus was just along Benin Lagos Expressway. But Ekawa campus was just in the heart of the city. And walking through that gate, oh, there was no pageantry. The architecture was just like you were walking into a secondary school, right there and then was a shock. But of course, what was very comforting was you could see, art pieces from past students that littered the whole campus. And so just looking around and seeing some of these beautiful sculptures, that was very, very comforting. And only much later, I fell in love with the campus itself for several reasons. One of that was the accommodation, the student residential areas. There they call it halls of residence, and that's where the students stay in the hostels. The rooms were so spacious, and one of the things that I loved so much was the steady supply of power, electricity. In fact, those days, what I'm telling you is in the mid 90s, those days when they take light, if the power supply from the government goes off, the internal system, standby generating system, kicks in. In fact, they had it as at the time I came into the university that by the time they count up to 10, if the light doesn't come up, whoever the janitor was on duty will be in big trouble. So you see light goes off and these students from their rooms, adjacent rooms, they start counting 1, 2, 3. Before you know it, light is back on. And that, I could tell you, there was nothing like that. And for me then, University of Benin was the best academy anybody could go to. Not only that, the proximity to the studio areas. So there were studio areas where you could go and, do your work, practice whatever you've been taught. Interestingly, every class that we had then will always end up with assignment for you to submit in the next class. So you discover that you're walking away from the class and you have this whole thing that, look, I have to do this. So, and I can tell you one of the most challenging times was the elective courses that we had to take then, theater arts. And this required us to be in the studio to rehearse with the theater students, and oh my goodness, I can tell you, it wasn't something that I was signed up for. But because it was prerequisite and it was needed, we had to do that. And much later, sitting back now, I could tell you some of the experiences that one was able to pick up from some of these things has helped, if not just for human management, being able to appreciate other people, being able to respect their views, being able to listen to them and see even the theatrics that people bring on. It's very dramatic. I had an episode with some of our classmates that before I left school, I thought some of them found it very difficult to forgive me because of an expression that I used in one of the rehearsals. And I could tell you this. I was focused. I didn't go to University of Benin just because I wanted to enjoy, the exuberance of being in the university. No, I wanted to study fine art such that I can tell my family that, look, art is profitable. Art is good. One can still study art and still be relevant to the society. And that was my whole thing. I didn't want anybody to look down on me because I went to study art. Like I said, what are you studying? You say you're learning drawing. That's what you went to the university to do. No, I wanted to be able to compete favorably with anyone who had maybe you studied medicine or law or just mention it, whatever the discipline is. For me, it was something that I want to be able to relate in whatever environment I found myself. So even coming from the artistic point of view, that should give me an edge, and I wanted to leverage that. So by the time I got to the University of Benin and settled in, I tell you, I met so many wonderful people there. And if I should tell you all about them, this will run for hours and hours. But I can tell you this. There's one individual that stands out with all my sojourn at the University of Benin. His name is El Drag, Leonardo Kuju. I know because he is a phenomenon. I say this because I don't subscribe so easily. By the time I came into the university, shortly after that, I think that was when he had his maiden edition solo exhibition, maiden solo exhibition, which was titled Rude Awakening. He had worked with White Waters, I think, powered by Richard Mofe-Damijo. They had a very good working relationship. And this exhibition took place in Didi Museum in Lagos. And so it was sensational. I think the title on itself explained what he was bringing to the mainframe art mainstream. Nobody has seen something of that nature. The dexterity, the quality of works that he produced, and the artistic excellence, it was just the talk of the town. So several newspapers and magazines, covered it. And I believe the television, if it's not AIT, one of those televisions in Lagos gave it a very good coverage. And so this was when I came into the university. Of course, I had seen some students too in their final years and, working with them, I'm observing them. But what made Drag stood out was Drag, he would come driving into the department. Then he had this car. It was a Mitsubishi Galant. He would drive in. Sometime he would be dressed in his tennis shoes, and we have his rackets like he's just coming from the tennis court and all of that. And then you have this music coming out of his car, and as energetic, as sporty as it is, you just have to admire the energy that he brings in. And now when you see his work, there is no mistaking about it. You will be inspired. And so I was already looking forward to the day I will be in a classroom with him, because those early stages, like the first year, second year, there were other guys that, take you courses like two-dimensional drawing and three-dimensional art and all of that. So I was looking forward to when I will be in class with him, and then so I can ask him questions and, get him engaged and all of that. But I can tell you, it was a whole different scenario. The reason why I say this is because on a very close rapport that I had with him, a very rich one, one of those days I asked him, so why don't you come to the class? Because the course that he took us was life painting. And incidentally, most of the time it would be the lecturer, the model. So we had male model and female model. So the model who came, I remember his name clearly. He would be the one, evidently he has discussed with the lecturer Drag and all of that. So he will come and he will pose. And so we just go on and paint. And sometimes it's like, so why can't these men come and tell us what we're doing right or what we're doing wrong and things like that? So it wasn't confrontational, but I engaged him, and he did tell me something in the line that he wanted everyone to define, what they're looking for, discover yourself and be yourself. As engaging as that could sound to me, I wouldn't subscribe to that as, when you talk about the practice and the theory of art and its pedagogy, the different approaches and things like that. But I can tell you this. When you see Drag's painting, when you see his works, you will be awestruck, and there's no taking that away from him. I'm saying this because I've been privileged to have been exposed to several artists of different genres and styles and expressions. Guys, gentlemen like Eni Junior. He was one fellow that helped me starting out, and he had gone to University of Port Harcourt, and I had another close friend of mine then, Rabbi Oswald, call him Wadi. So we've been close friends. He's so good with portraitures, and he can paint, portraits that will look real life. See if it's a photograph. And so I have been exposed to several other things, but that thing in me, that propensity, that drive to want to find out details and secrets and things like that. So that was one of the things that would make me said, hey, but I realized much later, I think a set behind us, all of those changed. Perhaps Drag was more engaged with the student directly and all of that, and he was having demonstrations with them. I didn't have that privilege, but I had access to him. That's something that is completely a whole different ballgame. I had access to him. He was not just my teacher, but he was also a big friend and a big brother to me. And so I could go to his studio, I could be with him in late hours. And so on that level is a different thing. And I had to respect my space. I had to respect that this is giving me access, the privilege that is very rare. So it's not everybody that enjoyed that. And that's how I can tell you that he has a name, an Igbo name, Uchenna. And not everybody knows this. And I'm sure that each time I want to tickle him, beyond the other things like Ibedonkot, which is between us, a code which we relate with, because he will always say my last name, and he has his story and how that happened, and I will always corroborate. I will say, yes, it happened that way, just because you don't want to challenge draft. You don't want to challenge drag. But here's the thing. Drag was committed. His work ethics, his devotion to studio practice, there is nothing to be compared to that. I mean, you read, you go to classes, you pick up books and magazines or whatever it is, and you're reading about art terminologies and all of these things. This is a man who puts to practice some of those things. You can see it. I tell you this. Several years later, when I went to, I think the first time was Northwestern University in Chicago, the northern side of Chicago. Now, so I walked into this conference. I think that conference, this gentleman, Wole Soyinka was there too, and Uche Okweke Aglo, or whatever, he was there as well. So I saw these portrait paintings, littered all the walls there, and these were original paintings. You see, it resonated with me, but I wasn't awestruck simply because when you go to the main auditorium, University of Benin, in the main campus, you will see paintings, portrait paintings of past vice chancellors, major administrators, pro-chancellors, and all of that, all over the whole place. And you'll be amazed the number. And I mean, when I look at it today, there is nothing as monumental as that. And these were all the works of drag. And sometimes I ask myself, even if there were some royalties attached to it, that on its own is good to earn him a professorial chair, because I'm yet to find within Nigeria any university here, and I stand to be corrected, that can, boast of such a robust collection coming from one singular artist. And when you look at these works, these are amazing work. I mean, I could stand there and watch in amazement. And because, not just because I graduated as the best graduating student of my set, the University of Benin then had this thing that they will have scholarship for every year, the best performing students. And so in every year, they will be the best and they will have to attend the convocation ceremony. So because I found myself in that position, so I did go to this place, auditorium, and even while the convocation ceremony is going on, my eyes were fixed on these paintings, just knowing that this is a work of an artist that I know and who is not just a lecturer, but also a dear friend of mine. I call him Uncle D for several reasons, simply because he is a gentleman who demonstrated before me what it means to do what? To practice what you preach. Now, drug, he smokes then and then, of course. He likes, I think, there's no promotional here. And so he likes to drink his stout and things like that. But beyond that, when you see his work and you see the dedication, the hours he spends in the studio, you will be drawn to want to be an artist. So this is just to tell you part of the things that influenced my life. Remember, as at this time, I've been exposed to other guys who had graduated, like Onyeka Ibe, Soji Yoloye, and even other guys like Alex Mokolo of Variety, Sam of Variety, Abraham Yobisere, and the list goes on and on. And these are people that I had the opportunity of working very closely with, and even guys like Professor Franco Gioma at the University of Port Harcourt, who later became a senior colleague of mine. And my artistic views and perception and schools of thought was so vast. But in all of that, it was just the management of the thought process and the discipline of studio work. That is the reason why till tomorrow I will always respect Drag, because he is a guy who at any point in time you see him committed in his art. You will call it craft. It's much more than craft because there is a whole lot that goes into it. And so when you see him paint, whether they're dramas or the emoji series or whatever they, he did a painting which you call Thunder. The Yoruba version of it. But the point is this. This is a man who influenced my formative years, in art. And I say this because till date, every time I get the opportunity to see any of his work, I'm always in awe. I know when I go into his studio and then this music will be playing. There's one of my favorite songs. I think it was, is it Brenda or who that played that song? You go like this, aye. And he would tease me, but he's very kind and generous. So sometimes he will allow me to go and repeat that track over and over. And so, walking into his studio where you have the linseed oil mixed with the fumes from his cigarettes and all of that. So it gives you a completely different experience. And I say this because I would wish that every school, every art academy will have such personalities in their fold who would not only just teach the theory of art, but also practice it in such a way that the student can see in real life that these things, they are doable. That's why I always tell whoever that cares to listen that I am a man of many streams, and several persons have influenced and contributed to my development. But at every point in time, I always look back So looking back, my history and my journey, it's very robust. It's very rich, and drag. I will always talk about. I talk about him. I had this recall this experience we had when Chief Ogene and someone had was very nasty and rude to him, and drag wouldn't take that because of the very good relationship that they had, and drag he had these two bottles of stout, and in his outburst he broke it, and there was an accident. The bottle cut his left hand, and he was bleeding profusely. My goodness, the blood was just pumping. I don't know, maybe because he's so energetic and all of that. And so before I could know it, the blood were all over my shirt, and I had to reach out for his key. And he had his first aid box right inside his office. Of course, his office doubled as his office and his studio. So I had to go fetch that, and we were able to take care of that. And of course, when some of the students saw my shirt with blood and all of that, and it created a kind of curiosity and all of that. But here is the thing. These was some of the things that I respected him for. Drag will always stand out to defend what he believes. Whether he's right or wrong, as long as he has made his judgment and he has come to the times that this is a just cause, he will stand for it. And I respect him for that. And so this is just some of the things that I see myself doing. Another gentleman that I like to talk to you about